Hello everyone, this is Darcinovia here. If you've already known, I announced I would do a review of the series as a whole to get more in depth. So for those of you who are new viewers who want to know if this series is worth your time, well, you're going to find out. I'm going to talk about the first book in the series right now, Betrayal, which starts Jason's path to the dark side. Notable things in this book that I liked. It introduced a character from the Marvel years, the original Marvel years. Um, those works were never taken seriously in terms of, canon, because they've always been a weird area, some sort of quasi-canon or S-canon. Some stuff happened, some stuff didn't. It was kind of a jumbled mess. But they took a character that existed in that era and incorporated her in this story, which I think works beautifully, honestly. And I think the way she manipulates Jason to become a Sith is great. I thought whatever time she has in this series, I think she does a great job. Bloodline, or Bloodlines, damn it, Disney canon, which is the second book in the series, which has a subplot involving Boba Fett. Now, if you're a Boba Fett fan and you want to read a story featuring Boba Fett, you're not going to be disappointed. I'm not a big fan of Boba Fett, but one thing I will give Karen Traviss for in this book, she did tie the prequels and the Knights of the Old Republic games into the narrative in here, and I really like that. The only thing I did not like about this book is Boba Fett's storyline felt like it got in the way of Jason's, which at this point, this is about Jason's fall to the dark side, not Boba Fett and his family problems. This does become an issue later in the series, just to be warned if you're not a fan of Mandalorians. But it's still a good book, regardless of that fact. I mean, this is when you start seeing a falling out between Jason and his family. So it begins here. The third book in the series, which has one of the few books in the EU that has Tenille Ka on the cover. Pretty nice. In this book, this is where we're introduced to a new character who goes by the name Alana, who's the daughter of Tenille Ka and Jason. Now, Jason's visions are about her. It's not explained in explicit detail who is the person, that is after her, but that gets revealed later in the series. But what do I like about this book? I like the fact that, it focused on Jason again and Ben's relationship with his parents. And not to mention, the build-up towards Jason's decision to become a Sith is building up in this book. This book is, Leia and Han are fugitives, and this also focuses on Ben Skywalker and his being tested if he's Sith-worthy material. One thing I really like about this book is Ben Skywalker's development as a character. To see him questioning Jason and his motives. What is he doing? Is he really doing the right thing? And I feel like this enriches Ben Skywalker's character. This book is at the point where I disagreed with some people regarding that they should have killed Ben instead of Mora. Yes, I gave that away, but it's honestly, if you've been on the internet for like many years, you would know that it's not a spoiler that Mora Jade died. Now, this book, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Karen Traviss, I do think this is probably her best book. This focuses on Jason, Ben, and Mora, which that was essential because this was the book that Jason falls to the dark side, that he actually does what he's supposed to do, to make the sacrifice. And Mora makes the most sense if you truly think about it. By killing Mora, he sacrifices, his reputation, his cousin's respect, his love. If you really look at it, this is the start of Jason's, his descent to the dark side, truly. Because Jason was struggling before this, but he is more confident than he was before. What do I think of this book? I think it's good. Probably my second favorite in the series, even though my favorite character dies in this book. This also starts an arc with Luke Skywalker, and it explains why Luke, can't fight Jason, and it's elaborated on later, considering, well, I'll explain that in a bit. The next book in the series, Inferno, which is the aftermath of Sacrifice, which focuses primarily on Ben Skywalker and Jason. This book, I will admit, despite Jason, doing some pretty fucked up shit, him backstabbing his family like he has been doing throughout the series, it was pretty hard reading, everyone turning on him, honestly. And this book did make me feel bad for Jason, even though he did do some evil things. But he was doing it for the right reasons. Jason wasn't evil. I do think that Jason was a kind of a villain that you could sympathize with, and from a different point of view. Not Kylo bitch Ren, who, the only reason his backstory is the way it is, so to make Han and Leia look bad. In this, Jason falls to the dark side based on his own choices, and he does it. He's sympathetic in the sense that he's trying to make the galaxy into a peaceful place, to a better place, and his goals are noble. He isn't this one-dimensional Skeletor-like villain that Kylo Ren is. And in my opinion, Jacen Solo is a great character and an amazing villain. Now, of course, Book 7, Fury, which deals with the aftermath of Inferno, where Ben Skywalker almost kills Jason. And this focuses, on that conflict, along with Arima Rar, I think that's her name. That's a subplot that I forgot to mention her, that started in the third book of this series. And this has some of the most badass moments of all of Star Wars, where Jagged Fell kills a fucking Dark Jedi with his bare hands. Oh, come on. You cannot tell me that isn't awesome. And yeah, I like this book. Fury. Revelation. Oh, God. You guys heard me rant about this book. Unfortunately, I don't have it in hardcover, because I'm not paying $40 for a fucking hardcover for this. Revelation, I felt like it should have ended at the point where Ben Skywalker, revealed to everyone that Jason killed Mara Jade, and that would lead to Invincible. Because, honestly, Boba Fett's family problems doesn't have an impact really that much on the narrative, that much. Not enough to warrant him. I'm sorry, there's a lot of issues I have with this book. Jason, despite having his red lightsaber on the cover, doesn't actually use it until this book, Invincible. Depending if you've already seen my review of this, this will be fresh to you. Invincible, I felt, was a great conclusion to this series. It could have easily been a rushed ending considering its length and how Revelation drags on and on and on. I felt this more than makes up for it. I don't need to tell you how I feel about Invincible because you've already seen it, but if you care to know, I thought it was really good. Now, Legacy of the Force, it has most of the books are good except one, which I don't think is bad. What do I think of it? What do I rate the entirety of Legacy of the Force in terms of my review? I think it's a good series. It isn't the New Jedi Order. It isn't great like New Jedi Order was, in my opinion, considering the fact that New Jedi Order was a brand new concept. This was more familiar territory where they focused more on a smaller scaled conflict than the New Jedi Order, which felt kind of like a step down, but I can understand why they did that, considering that it was a long series. People were sick of some of the weird stuff they would consider weird, like some insectoids from the Dark Nest trilogy, and the Yuuzhan Vong. People just wanted something that's more what they feel Star Wars. I don't agree with those notions, but I feel like Legacy of the Force was more back to basics in terms of Star Wars at the time, and I believe that's why they wrote it. But that doesn't make it bad. I think it's a good story. I felt like this could have been a great sequel trilogy. If Lucasfilm didn't want to use the expanded universe, they could have easily used this as a template. I mean, Kylo Ren, they could have copied Jason Solo's story, and they could have made him a compelling villain that instead of making him to some one-dimensional emo bitch. This series on its own could be read without reading anything else in the expanded universe. If you have no interest in reading a 19-book series, because that's too much, but you want to read something that's more in the line of what you think Star Wars should be, I think Legacy of the Force is a good place to start with. I don't think I would start here, but if you're looking for a Star Wars story that takes place 30 years after Return of the Jedi, but you hated the sequels and you wanted a story that has a story of good versus evil, or you want something that does have a little gray area and have it done right, because honestly, not everyone's an all-out good guy or all-out bad guy. I mean, there are some evil people, don't get me wrong, but Jason was the hero of his story. Even as Darth Caedus, he was the hero of his own story. One of the greatest Star Wars villains ever. And Jason Solo, as Darth Caedus, I felt was a great character. He was a great villain. And unlike Kylo Ren, who's one-dimensional, who has no depth to him, he isn't a whiny little emo bitch. He actually has a three-dimensional character. He has more to him. Even if you take away everything that he went through in his journey in the New Jedi Order series, I think this stands enough on its own. Jason, in this series alone, is compelling enough where you don't need to read everything else. And honestly, I think this is also good if you want a Luke Skywalker that isn't disrespected, that is the head of the Jedi Order, that isn't castrated. Why am I bringing this up? Because, unfortunately, as of this uploading, the sequels controversy won't end. And I feel like there's something better out there that people can enjoy. And if you want to experience that, these books aren't very hard to find. I think they're good. Also, if you want to check out the source material that one of the fan films, has, this novel is the base for that movie. If you want to know where it came from, I do think I recommend it. I think anyone that is a Star Wars fan, I think if they haven't read anything in the EU before, I think they could enjoy it. And that's all I'm going to say. It's not as long as I originally intended, but you know what? there isn't much more I can add. I think this series is good. I think anyone can enjoy it if they are disappointed with the sequels. Though I can understand why some people do not like this series. They don't like the way they treated the characters. I'm referring to Tahiri and Jason. And I can understand those criticisms. But I felt like this was good, honestly. Even though Jason Falling to the Dark Side wasn't necessarily the most original, I felt like it was done so much better than the prequels. I'm sorry, people. I love those movies. But Jason's storyline is just so much more compelling than Anakin's. And if you read all those stories, I just think Jason is a much more compelling character, especially Darth Caedus as a villain. Do I wish some things were done differently? Yes. I wish Karen Travis didn't waste time on Mandalorians, and I wish we would have saw how powerful Darth Caedus truly was. We never got to see that or read that because all that time was wasted. But what can you do? You can't change the past. Anyway, this is Darth Sinovia. May the Force be with you. And I give this series a good rating. I think it's worth your time, especially if you want to read something in Star Wars that's more in line what you like about Star Wars. I think if you approach it with an open mind, I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thank you.